Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to this learning experience brought to you by AWS and Accenture. My name is Cody, and welcome back to Techstrong Learning. We are rejoining today for part two of our conversation on generative AI. But before we dive into things, I have just a couple of notes I'd like to review with everyone. First of all, we are recording today's session. So if you miss any of our conversation, if you'd like to rewatch, or of course, if you'd like to share with your team, you will be receiving that recording via email shortly after we conclude this live session today. Now, if you'd like to be part of our conversation, there are a couple of ways for you to join in. The first option is the chat tab on the right side of your screen. So when you find that chat tab, let us know from where in the world you are joining us today. Now, if you have any specific questions, we would like you to direct those to the Q&A tab, as we do have some folks behind the scenes who will be here to help answer some of those via text. Additionally, if you jump over to that handout section, you'll see there is a link to our survey, which feel free to fill that out at the end of our program. But there's also a link to part one of our conversation. So if you'd like to go back and watch that for some added context, that is there included for you in that handout section. So our conversation today revolves around generative AI, top telco use cases. And I'm joined today by Mohan Bhaskaran, Principal Partner Development Manager at AWS, Davide Bellini, Managing Director at Accenture, Ross McWalter, Head of Telecom Applications at AWS, and leading our conversation is Mitchell Ashley, CTO of Techstrong Group and GM here at Techstrong Research. So thank you, Mohan, Davide, and Ross for joining us today. Mitch, I'm going to invite you and the rest of the panel to join us on screen and take it from here. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone.
Thank you very much, Cody. Appreciate you getting things kicked off for us. This is part two in a two-part series that we're talking about generative AI within the telco industry. In part one, we were covering some of the work that AWS and Accenture have been doing to really understand where generative AI can best be applied within the market for their telco customers, and a little bit of a deep dive into kind of how their thought process worked and some of the areas of collaboration. So we're going to get into the top telco use cases for generative AI. We're going to dive deeper into the specifics. Unfortunately, we won't be able to get into all the use cases or a number of them, even the top priorities, but we're going to take about three of them or so and jump into a little bit more detail about that, kind of tell you what we're thinking about doing. So before we do that, I'd love to have all of you introduce yourself. So if you would, Ross, if you want to start out, if you'd introduce yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my name is Ross McWalter. I'm based out of Seattle. I'm with AWS Telecom Industry Business Unit. And within that business unit, I lead a team focused on data, AI, ML, and customer experience, including contact center with AWS, that is Amazon Connect. And my customers are basically every telco customer worldwide in some way or form we're touching. So happy to be here and meet you all. Thank you.
Excellent. David, if you would introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mitch. Davide Bellini. I'm based in Milan, and I lead our data and AI practice for communication, media, and technology industry, which includes all the communication service provider, the media company, the software platform, and all the high tech, which are consumer electronics, network equipment providers, semiconductors company, and in general, high tech manufacturer. Right? Been in Accenture for 24 years, always working in comms and media industry, always on data and AI topics. So very excited to be here to talk about this new wave of generative AI. Thank you for
having me. Milan. I'm very jealous. I live in Colorado, beautiful country, but love Milan and Italy. Okay, Mohan, if you would introduce yourself, please.
Thanks, Mitch. Thanks for having us on the part two. Pleasure to be here. My name is Mohan Bhaskaran. I'm based out in Seattle. I'm with AWS, and I lead the global intersection between Accenture and AWS for comms, media, and high-tech industries. Predominantly looking after our thought leadership, joint go-to-market, and our solutioning, and how do we drive value in the marketplace. So a pleasure to be here, and really looking forward to the conversation on the deep dive for Gen AI.
Pleasure having all of you here. Well, by the way, we have the link available to go back and watch part one. So don't worry, you won't miss anything. You'll be able to watch that at your leisure. We'll provide the link here. But just as a way of setup, I know there were 7 functional areas in some of the work that you did together. Mohan, if you would kind of give us a little snapshot of that work and what those 7 functional areas are, and then we're going to jump right into some of the use cases.
Yeah, thanks, Mitch. As we mentioned in the last one, webinar, both of our teams got together and we looked at, okay, what points of view can we jointly take to market that drive business outcomes and value transformation, right? So, in the last one, Davide mentioned about the outcomes from a productivity boost perspective, enhancing customer experience, some of the cost optimization, and new revenue generation and service creation. So we kind of use those as our guiding principles and said, okay, now what are some of those? How can the CSPs be positioned to leverage the Gen AI, specifically the foundation models, to break through and innovate and to gain competitive advantage across their operations, right? It could be from all the way from front of the office to the back of the office, through to network and IT. So with that context, I think we kind of dug deep across the 5 domains, specifically focused on reinvention and optimization, right? So IT DevOps, where we looked at, okay, how can we help the operators around legacy system understanding, and some of the areas around API and how do we use generative AI tools to optimize the API assessment. And also, the second domain that we looked at is customer engagement. We had a lot of talk in the previous webinar about hyper-personalization. So this thing about engaging customer better. Some of the use cases that we talked about was how do we reduce some of the post-call action? How do we automate that, and how do we augment the agents to reduce the workload and be efficient and effective in serving the customers? We looked at how do we create digital twins so that we feel comfortable experimenting with new product sets and services, and more importantly and more broad, how does that what are some of those areas of collaboration there? So this is the IT DevOps, customer engagement, and then we looked at the back office and the workforce productivity. Again, some of the key areas where we had a lot of feedback from the customers are around policy and process documentation. How do we automate some of those mundane tasks? A lot of cost savings from contract management and RFP response. How do you click through the regulatory compliance and also keep cost optimized in those areas? Widely accepted and widely feedback on fraud, revenue assurance and fraud management. We then jumped off to the, how do we help create new revenue streams, right? So new product development. How can we help operators take SMB-related digital assistance to market? What are some of those use cases there? We then looked at network. I mean, the biggest spend from an operator is network, and we would want to look at, and we did look at the areas of how we can help from a automating quality check perspective, both the design and the engineering aspect, and then how do we use network, generative AI with the network design and optimization and expansion, right? So using the drones, taking 3D visualization of their towers, and how do we analyze data to give those insights to be able to better plan and minimize truck rolls, and more broadly from a sustainability perspective, what are some of those areas where we can optimize the energy? So I know I've covered a lot, the whole breadth of it, but we're really looking forward to driving values. As I said, how do we boost productivity, right? So how do we enhance customer experience? How do we help them optimize cost? And more importantly, how do we help them create new revenue generation, new revenue streams? So Mitch, these are the areas that we covered off.
Very good. A very systematic process of kind of thinking about those domains across the business for telcos. Well, let's jump into our first top use case for telcos. David, I know one of the things that always comes up top of my list working in the telco industry is customer service, customer engagement, the customer center, all the things that interact with customers, because it's so important from an experience and satisfaction, but also cost and things that go into it. Tell us a little bit about the use case that falls into that area.
Yes, thank you, Mitch. And Mohan gave us a very good overview of all the use cases, and there were really a lot. But that's what you get when you put an Accenture team and an AWS team in a room for a day, right? So you can't expect less than that. Customer service is one of the biggest, most strategic assets that all telcos have, and apart from their core service and connectivity, it's actually the face of a telco in the marketplace, right? So it impacts customer perception, NPS, and branding, positioning, and it's really strategic. And telcos have been investing for years in there. And they've also been trying to optimize cost in this space because it's a very expensive asset to manage, right? I have to say also with, sometimes positive stories, sometimes less positive stories, right? Because obviously, when you make your customer base used to interact with individuals in a certain way, and then all of a sudden you ask them to divert to virtual assistants or to audio messages, the perception is not always positive, right? And so there have been ups and downs in this space in using AI, but generative AI really represents a breakthrough in this area, and in several aspects of it, right? Because you can think about customer service in three aspects, right? So the direct to consumer interactions, and there's the entire world of the chatbots and the virtual assistants, etc., where generative AI can introduce a much more conversational experience, can introduce the possibility to have interactive conversation and fine-tune the needs of a customer, so a much more compelling experience. The second area is the agent assistant, right? So all the work that the AI can do to allow the agent in focus solely on treating the customer without having to take care of all the admin that typically they take care of in real time while they're talking to customers. So filling up forms or browsing through a knowledge management to find the right policy or document to answer a customer question, right? All those activities are distracting the agent from the customer needs, are increasing the average handling time of a call, which is the one of the main KPIs that all call centers are measured against, right? So having an assistant to support in that phase is a game changer. And the third area is everything that happens once the call is closed. And there are a lot of things that typically happen, right? Contact reasons are populated, notes of the calls are written manually, trouble tickets are open to solve customer problems that have been presented during the calls, right? And all those activities on one side are expensive because they are human-driven and take time. And on the other side, since they are not focused on customer service, are typically executed very quickly. So there is a tension from each agent to minimize the time spent in doing those things because it has to be focused on customer. And this means that typically the result of those activities done quickly and with time pressure, the quality is not very high. Right? So that's where generative AI can come in helping, because thanks to the pre-trained model, there is the possibility to immediately summarize the call. So having a call transcript and a call of many minutes be summarized in few lines. There is the possibility to automatically populate the contact reasons or to validate the contact reasons that were populated by customer by analyzing the call transcript and understanding if the agent configured the proper call reasons. the entire set of manually defined nodes can be reviewed and rewritten to be more coherent and adherent to the content of the call that happened. And also the text of the trouble ticket can be rewritten so that is more clear. It includes all the notes and details, ultimately speeding up the conversion of this ticket and the resolution of the problem, right? So, and if you want, we're finding a lot of that this use case resonates a lot with our clients because it's a very low risk and ready to use type of use case. So it's one of the typical use case our clients can start with, right? Because it's not impacting the way agent work. So there isn't change management involved. It doesn't impact the customer. So it's not a frontline type of use case. And it can entirely leverage on the, let's say, out of the box capabilities that are typically provided by the large language models that are available in this space, because it leverages the competence of text summarization, text interpretation, translation, which are out of the box, right? So it's not required to heavily fine-tune the model to be able to use and execute this use case, right? So thinking about low risk, high value use case to start from in an area that is very expensive and with potential of optimization, we think that this post-call housekeeping, if you want to call it that way, it's a really low-hanging fruit that we want to address quickly for our clients.
You know, David, one of the things that it makes me think of, you talked about the post-call housekeeping. Folks don't realize when they're on the phone with the rep what happens after they're done. But the fact that you have the conversation, the recording of that, it could be analyzed, translated to text. But the analysis that can be done on that, how much time do we spend on what topics? When were there gaps and pauses? You know, the kind of the time motion study, but thinking about the entire call experience and what can we do to help both optimize that from a efficiency standpoint, but also improving customer service. So there's so many areas where I think we can apply generative AI that you were talking about that could make a massive difference.
Yeah, this is also an area where telcos have unique data. And so Mohan briefly mentioned the opportunity of create a digital twin of your customer base by leveraging all this data and then using that as a sparring partner. For example, we have cases where we created the AI and we're using it to train new agents. So the agents, instead of becoming proficient by making mistake in dealing with real customer, is actually dealing with an AI that behaves like the customer base because it's been trained on those previous interaction, and the agent has the possibility to test himself, to respond, and in real time, interaction by interaction, measure how good he's doing in terms of clarity, compassion, empathy, service, et cetera, right? So yeah, the area of application is endless. Sentiment analysis. Today, the majority of the evaluation of NPS, TNPS, so the interaction, it happens through surveys, right? So at the end of the interaction, the customer is briefed is prompted with a survey, and he has to give a 1 to 10 scoring of that service. But customers lie, and they might not be reliable, etc. Right? So while analyzing the transcript of the call, the AI is absolutely capable to identify the sentiment of the call. And even if we want to continue to ask feedbacks to customers, because it feels good to be asked for a feedback, right? So that is something that you might want to continue to do. So you can still using the AI to validate if the feedback and the scoring that has been given by the customer is actually real based on the sentiment analysis that is inferred from the conversation, right? So yeah, sky's the limit, but exactly because we're down to earth, enterprise grade, we want to bring value, reliable value, safe, secure, responsible, scalable to our clients. That's where we are recommending to start the journey, and we are creating a solution together to tap that use case.
Yeah, I'm sure Ross has a really great perspective on this, but I don't want to give it to Ross on. But one thing that we did here, and David and Ross, jump in here, please. One thing we did here was, there needs to be an intentional approach, not to be client facing with an experimentational technology. It's not our view. It's not Accenture's view or AWS view, but it is customer's view, and I think we should respect that, right? So we should. So one of the things that we talked about in the room is how do we, and part of the reason for this use case is, we could sit behind augmenting the agents, help them be more productive, and kind of give those insights to populate and to quality check and kind of take the next call and be more productive. So those kind of guardrails, we discussed at length, that this partnership would look like, along with the likes of, okay, how, what models do we use, what kind of, how do we, set up the infrastructure, the compute perspective, what kind of, data that we need to tap into, make them in a digital twin, but more importantly, what are the, guardrails that we need to put in place as well. So, Ross, what's your thoughts on that?
I don't know. I'm not sure what you're asking, honestly.
Let me try this, Ross. I think one of the things you could bring a unique perspective on too is also think about the technology landscape, right? The underpinnings of what it takes to implement something. I don't mean to create the architecture on the fly for us, but as you think about all the capabilities, AWS has and how you can bring that to bear with the, both behind the scenes, but also, in parallel, augmenting the customer service rep's job. What are the things that come to mind from your standpoint?
Yeah, so we do a lot of work in this area, and we, if you think about it, we do have a very strong pedigree in contact center, right? We've got Amazon Connect. We've probably got, if not the largest contact center in the world, certainly one of the largest ones with Amazon.com. So we've got a lot of experience and domain expertise in this space. So a lot of the products that we have and the technology is derived from us eating our own dog food, if you like. So when we adapt them to customers, because we think they'd be valuable to our customers. But because of that, I think we've got a very comprehensive portfolio of solutions and technology for contact center. So if you think about even from how we actually get the voice into the solution, if you like. So in some way or form, you need to get the signaling and the media channel in so that you can actually transcribe it at the same time as the agent is having the communication with the customer, right? So and we have a service called Chime Voice Connector, which can do that. And again, like all of our services, it scales up, scales down, depending on the usage. And then audio and signaling is piped in. Then we have the ability through some of our AI services like Amazon Transcribe, Amazon Comprehend, or even Transcribe Call Analytics, which really integrates transcription and natural language together into one. And then coupling that with generative AI capabilities, in our case through Amazon Bedrock or Amazon SageMaker, it means that right across the continuum of all of these different AI services plus technologies, we can very quickly bring solutions to bear for our customers so that they can experiment very quickly. So case in point, for live call analytics and post-call analytics, which is broadly what we spoke about here, we've got a pre-built solution which customers could deploy in about 45 minutes into their account. And actually that comes with all the plumbing that we talked about, the ability to pipe the audio and signaling in there, et cetera, and then they can experiment, and then they can adapt it, and they can customize to their use cases.
Very good. Why don't we turn our attention to the network side of things, the NOC? Ross, if you want to dive into that use case.
Yeah, so the network area it's very interesting, and our customers are showing a lot of interest in it. We did a survey with a company called Alton Solon, where we spoke to over 100 C-level execs at telcos around the world. And we saw this kind of spectrum of use cases where, easy to implement, maybe, questionable value, right through to difficult to implement, but high value potential. These ones they saw as a little bit more forward thinking than the other use cases. But when we started to kind of work directly with customers and show them some of the capabilities that we're developing, it's really, really exciting them. So if you kind of take a step back to what the situation is in the network world, pre-Gen AI, let's say. So, you take a mobile network, you've got multiple domains, right? You got the RAN, the access network, you've got the core, you've got IMS, you've got the backhaul, you've got UEs or devices on the end of that. It's very, very complicated. So lots of different domains. They're all generating their own data that's landing in operational data stores, which are fragmented, right? So all of this data is spread across lots of operational data stores. It's not correlated, and it's not brought together in a meaningful way. So the result of that is that you get kind of service assurance platforms and observability across multiple domains, all looking for problems in their domain, but not really having this kind of holistic view of what is actually happening in the network. Networks these days are so complicated that a problem could start at an edge router, and it could end up in congestion, in a region or something to that effect, right? So it's very kind of viral the way that it spreads. So what we're doing is really bringing that all together and using generative AI to reason across all these information sources. And we're also bringing together the two components, which is really design time. So when you're actually designing the network, when you're defining configuration, you're doing change management, all those components, which actually are the leading cause for network outages, human error during configuration, plus the runtime part. So all of those operational data stores, the KPIs, the PM, the FM, the probe data, bringing that all together into a consolidated view. And part of that, what we're doing is actually modeling the network as well in what we call a network ontology, using a graph database to actually model the network, attribute KPIs and metrics to each node, and then using traditional anomaly detection, forecasting, and clustering to identify where those problems are. And once we know where the problem is and where and when it's happening, then we can use those data sources to reason across the data to actually see what is the most probable cause for this anomaly or this breach in a KPI or a threshold. And then that is used, obviously, to send back some kind of indication of how to remediate or triage or fix the problem. So the end goal is to reduce that mean time to repair, which in many telcos for major outages can be hours, if not days, that we've seen recently. So that's broadly what we're working on. There's kind of 4 different components that bring that all together. One is the network design. So GenAI actually generates the network design configuration and the network ontology. Then there's configuration. So intent-based configuration. Are you designing for power optimization, for quality of service? Then there's the observability stuff that we talked about, which is using generative AI to reason across different information sources, whether it's graph, structured DB, etc. And that really opens this up to any persona in the organization. You don't need to write SQL. You don't need to know where the data resides. You just ask questions of the data in natural language and get responses. Then the final point, like we say, which is probably the most important and challenging, is the fault resolution part. And just anecdotally, some of the customers we talk to, they think that they're around a 30% accuracy for root cause analysis using their AIOps platform. We believe that bringing this all together into this holistic view in what we're calling Net Genius is going to move that up to about a 90+% accuracy in actually remediating a problem and providing a root cause analysis.
I can imagine there's a lot of network engineers and NOC operators saying, I want that. How do we get that?
Yeah,
Let's get that
exactly.
going. David, any thoughts on kind of a people process of this too? That's the magic of bringing all three, technology, people, and process together in the NOC.
Yeah, and I think I mean you would made a joke about network engineers wanted that, which is actually true, but it also means that for a large portion of people, it's a very drastic change in the way of working. And it's an organizational topic, because this type of capability, as Ross was pointing out, allows new people to do type of jobs that were only reserved to specifically skilled individuals before, right? So gives the possibility to have control to people that have a different type of skill set. It implies that some of the things that were under a human control now can be managed by a machine that has to be trusted, but it also has to be controlled somehow, right? So while before I had to control human beings working and track roles going up and down and reconfiguring network, and now I have new protocols and new capabilities to be able to control a self healing network that is entirely software driven, and that's different skills. Right, because I need code developers for that I didn't need before. Right? It implies breaking the data silos. The fact that these ODS that these operational data store that Ross was mentioning are dispersed in several cases is also because of the reluctancy of certain sub-departments in sharing their data with others, because they're protecting their organization, because they want to take care of the dirty stuff in-house, without maybe too much transparency. So even from a cultural standpoint, embracing the change of breaking the data silos, creating a single view of the network, so sharing all those information is a big change in an organization, right? So and that's exactly the secret sauce of our collaboration, right? Because Ross and his team can focus on engineering this single view of the network, while we can take care of redesigning the process, changing the way people work, identifying the value opportunity in adjusting certain processes and rolling out at scale. Because let's to echo the point you made about scaling in the first chapter of the webinar. Here we're talking about massive infrastructure and huge geographies all around the world. So we're not talking small operation and changing all that. It's a big process.
And just to echo your point on the people side, never underestimate the change management involved in going through this, which is very significant. Let's jump to our third use case. Mohan, we're going to go to you, talking a little bit about contract management, vendor management side of things. Do you want to dive into what some of the thinking is around RFPs, kind of contract management, all of that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thanks, Mitch. So I think one of the things that we talked about earlier about having that functional domain outcomes is cost. So this use case is driving towards that, delivering towards that. So multiple anecdotes from the customer, the voice of the customer in the room. We had that contracts management. It's a pretty big cost center for them, and that consistently there are kind of standard approaches. So using the LLMs and some of the foundation models, not just specific to telco, but these capabilities have been built over large data sets across multiple other industries where contract, like for example, health and sciences, right? So contract is paramount in the way how they approach legal documents, so to speak. So we're going to use those the wider data sets and also the telco specific experiences that we have in driving those model changes. Contract management, where we can help the salespeople be more effective on some of the standard languages that the telcos use. I mean, it's one of those, the flow downs in the industry, as we know, is one of really complex place, and contracts management in many of our operator customers, it's a pretty significant cost base. So I think having this capability of standardizing, using Gen AI tool sets to standardize and kind of best practice some of those responses for RFPs from a sales perspective, or from a supplier standpoint. How do we quickly generate those contracts to be able to serve for the suppliers, and also more importantly, what we heard is what are some of those kind of as I mentioned, flow downs, right? So risk mitigation is one of the key component of the outcome that we're trying to solve for. So what are some of those risks? How can it be centrally managed through the model definition standpoint, and finally having the ability to democratize that across throughout the sales process, right? So a rep that goes out to a client, can quickly sum up a contract, albeit from an SME perspective or from an enterprise standpoint. How do we develop those? How do we develop those capabilities? Is what we talked about. So yeah, it's a really interesting area from the feedback that we got, and some that has a tangible value from a cost perspective.
David, your perspective on it too?
I think Mohan covered it very well. I think there is also an angle that maybe is less obvious of accelerating innovation. I mean, for many of us that worked in the industry long enough, right? Telco have, over the course of the year, very structured, solid, procurement-driven processes when they had to go through major transformation initiative, right? Because they are risk-adverse company, and they want to make sure to do the right thing, right? But this often has significantly slower the pace of innovation, exactly because these procurement-led processes are slow, because they need to go and look at all the details, etc. So think about when in this case, the telco is not the ERFE respondent, but is the ERFE issuer, right?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
That takes months and months to identify the partner to do large transformation. Those are months lost in time to market, in speed of innovation, right? So even in that angle, having something that speeds up that aspect of the processes. So I receive 10, 15, 150 page each proposals. I want a summarization of those. I want to compare apple with apple, all the bidders, understanding the gaps, the differences. That can be done in a matter of minutes, versus what was before Gen AI, requiring probably weeks just to read all the content received and being able somehow to structure it in a format that could compare the different offers, right? So I think there is also a speed angle, not just a cost optimization or a standardization, that I think is an interesting opportunity for telco here.
Very good. Ross, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'll just say, I think, we do hear from customers that certainly, on the enterprise side, where they are, inundated with RFPs from enterprise customers, that, all of these efficiencies apply around the fact that, to David's point, it currently takes potentially weeks to get these out. They can shorten that cycle down to days and improve potentially the quality, because you got a fairly standardized quality bar, and there's lots of inputs to these things from sales, marketing, legal, all that kind of stuff. So what that means is that they can actually address more of these RFPs or RFIs, and kind of increase that kind of turnover rate of applications. And anecdotally, we hear that they're expecting that to drive an uptick in by 20 to 30% in their win rate, just because they're doing more and they're servicing more customers with the same amount of people. And they're resource constrained, and in many cases they just couldn't respond to all of them, right? So that's where we're seeing some of the interest on the enterprise side of things.
Amazing. Very cool. Just imagine between generative AI and the analytics, what the power is here to this use case. Well, we mentioned that there were 6 that emerged actually out of over 30 different use cases. And those are, I'm sure there were many other, but over 30 high value ones. The other 6, I believe that you mentioned, Mohan, were legacy systems understanding, network design optimization, revenue assurance. We kind of referenced those in this, but I guess we have to hold a little bit back so folks will come look for more information from AWS and Accenture. Any closing thoughts from each of you before we wrap things up? Mohan, you want to help close this out?
I think, thanks, Mitch. I think there's a lot more that we can discuss, but I do want to leave the audience with what we can help them with, right? So both Accenture and AWS really are intentionally partnering in the AI space, generative AI space. We bring a broad set of tool sets. We want to focus. Think of it as 3 different tasks, right? So we can help strategize, organize, and experiment, for Gen AI use cases and drive, more capabilities and speed to value. So that's bucket number 1. Bucket number 2 is, we can also help prove out value, quickly organize POCs and pilots, where we can build on it and we can, iterate it and we can help optimize that too. And last but not the least is deploy and scale solutions, right? So once we trial it, once we prove the value out, we can deploy it at a much more rapid scale, using the ecosystem of partners, the ISVs and others, along with Accenture. But we want to do this in a more kind of programmatic way, and I think Ross and David, they both mentioned about this, right? How do we develop a modern data architecture, one that where we can provide a better ability to experiment and to deploy generative AI at scale across many use cases, not the ones that, not just the ones that you're trialing, but across many other functions. Second thing is, how do we help build the operators with the Gen AI talent and capabilities? Very important that, we develop it and we actually provide the capability, or we teach them how to do that. So I think we are very cognizant of the fact that, and we want to do that with them, right? And last but not the least ones, I think David and Ross both mentioned this as well. Responsible and secure generative AI. It's very important that we're dealing with a whole lot of data sets that we need to be more, more concerned about security, where the data leakage from the models don't go back into or from the wider internet or the other way around. And more importantly, the guardrails that we talked about, having responsible AI as well. So, these are my parting thoughts that we stand ready for the operators to help them drive business value with generative AI and a great partner like Accenture. We're ready to help.
David, Ross, any final thoughts?
Well, first of all, Accenture is very serious about generative AI, right? This is a very strategic topic for us. We were the first one announcing the 3 billion investments to double up our workforce from 40,000, 80,000 professionals in Gen AI. We were the first one announcing in the market the number of deals that we sold and the sales we made in generative AI. So we have a very clear strategy on one, enabling our clients with Gen AI specific initiative. 2, Gen AI in the services that we already provide today to improve efficiency, speed, and time to market. And 3, to eat our own dog food, as Ross was saying. So to embed Gen AI and changing the way that we do our job, thanks to that. And so the first aspect is this is top priority for us. And the second remark that I want to make is that I think there is a lot of offer today in the market of single use cases or successful POCs. But what the moment our client needs to move beyond pure successful POC to scale this capability across the entire organization, that's the game we want to play together with a partner like AWS, because we don't believe there is the same level of offer in the market of organizations that are capable to help our clients do this pivot of really becoming AI-driven organization and fully exploiting the value of this technology.
It is very impressive what you can do together. Ross, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think these guys have covered it pretty thoroughly. But I mean, like, fundamentally, what we're saying is you've got basically the market-leading cloud provider. We've got the broadest range of technology, the most operationally secure, best security posture, and we're partnering with, a top-tier GSI consulting firm that is, as David says, they're serious about this. So I think we put our seriousness together and you get, something that's extremely serious. So we're excited to partner together and, transform our customer experiences.
Fantastic. Well, thank you to all three of you, Mohan, Ross, and David. David, especially you, given the hour of the day, where you are. I do want to thank our audience, too, for being with us and walking through some of these use cases and diving into the specifics and talking about what we can really do, make a difference, make a business impact, have some great business outcomes with the technology, but also thinking about the people in the process and the whole package and how that has to happen across multiple domains within the telco business. So with that, thanks to the AWS and the Accenture team, the partnership, and I'm going to turn it back to Cody to let him wrap things up.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mohan, Davide, Ross, and Mitch for joining us today. I know there were a couple of questions we weren't able to get to, so we'll be sure to send those over to our speakers, and they'll be able to follow up with you with a post-webinar email. So just a couple more reminders. I did put a link to our survey there in the chat, so feel free to fill that out for us today. We'd really appreciate it. I'll also remind everyone that this session was recorded today, so following this program, you'll receive an email with a link to access that recording on demand. And you can also find it on the DevOps website at devops.com/webinars, and it will be in the on-demand section waiting for you. I'd like to thank AWS and Accenture for sponsoring our program today. And to everyone here, thank you so much for attending live. We appreciate you joining us, and we hope to see everyone at a future Techstrong learning experience. Have a great rest of your day, and you may now disconnect. Thanks again, everyone.